Have you ever wondered what Lampião would do if one of his men was captured and sentenced to death? Today you'll witness the day the king of the Backlands defied bars, bullets, and even death itself to rescue one of his most loyal companions. It's a blazing tale from the heart of the Sertão, a story of betrayal, escape, and a plan so bold that it still echoes like legend along dusty dirt roads. Before we begin, if stories like this grab your attention, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps keep the legacy of the Cangacho alive around here. All right. Ready or not, get your heart prepared and come with me to the Backlands. Let's go. The morning felt slow in Barra do Sal. One of those lazy days when the loudest sound was the hiss of beans on the stove, along with the lazy creak of the general store's old wooden door, but no one there had any clue what was about to unfold. Ra, an old companion of Lampião, had come down to the village with his guard lowered, thinking the land was safe. He was a tough man, knife, scar on the chin, deep-set eyes of someone who had killed soldiers in hand-to-hand combat and escaped ambushes like a snake in the brush. But that day, bad luck came riding. He stepped into the store calmly, unaware that bait had been set inside. A trusted informant had been captured 2 days earlier, and he talked. It all happened fast. Ra was picking out some tobacco when he heard the dry click of a rifle bolt. He turned, hand already reaching for his blade, but it was too late. 4 officers jumped from behind the shelves like animals from a trap. They took him by force, shouting, punching, overpowering him. He didn't even have time to draw his weapon. They dragged him out like hunted prey, yelling in triumph. The nearby town of Riachão, just a league away, was chosen as the stage for the show. The local sheriff, an ambitious man named Tobias Ferreira, saw Ra's capture as his golden ticket. He wired Recife and even Rio de Janeiro. "We've caught one of Lampião's men. The trial will be swift. Justice will be served." The government didn't answer, but they sent reinforcements, soldiers, mercenaries, officers from all sides. Riachão turned into an armed anthill. Ra was thrown into a filthy cell, just a torn hammock and a bucket. No one spoke to him. They didn't let him drink. But they beat him, and hard. They wanted the location of the camp, names, hides, secrets. He didn't open his mouth. By the 2nd day, broken ribs. 4th day, front teeth knocked out. 5th day, he was spitting blood. But he stayed silent. Word spread quickly through the Backlands. A loyal Quateiro crossed 3 leagues just to get word to Lampião. When the king of the Cangaço heard, he was deep in a hideout among rocks and thickets, studying the map of a farm he planned to raid. But when he heard Araya's name, Lampião stopped. He lowered his machete slowly and fell silent. "Are you sure it's him?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the dirt. "I saw it with my own eyes," the man said. "They dragged him off with his head down, but he still spat on the ground." Lampião stood up, pulled his rifle, aimed into the void, and fired into the dirt. The shot echoed through the woods like a bad omen. "The town thinks they caught a little bird, but they caught fire," he muttered. "I'm getting Araya back, even if I have to carry him in my arms." He knew rescuing a man like Araya would bring chaos. The government would respond with fury. But Lampião wasn't the kind of leader to let his men die in a cell. If they had to bleed, it would be with a rifle in their hands, never chained like dogs. He gathered the gang, sharp eyes, sharper knives, rope, powder. The plan was still a blur, but the rage was already etched in stone. That night, under the moonlight, Lampião moved away from the campfire. He sat alone in the silence, clutched the little St. Anthony medal hanging from his neck, and squeezed it hard. "Guide me, my patron. Help me bring him back. because if I don't come back, hell will look like a picnic." And it was there, in that heavy silence, that the legend of the impossible escape was born. Ria Chao stopped being a quiet little town the day the government sent reinforcements. The 6-man detachment grew to nearly 20, all armed to the teeth. The jail gained 2 mounted rifles at its doors and double the guards, day and night. No one in, no one out. The whole town became a prison. Along with Araya, Sheriff Tobias Ferreira strutted around with his chest puffed out, a new leather vest and polished dagger on his belt. He spoke loud, like a man on a campaign stage. "This arrest will change the fate of the Backlands. If Lampião comes, he dies here, and if he doesn't, Araya dies. Either way, we win." But those who truly knew Lampião knew it wouldn't be that simple, and even Tobias, despite his swollen pride, began to sweat when a message arrived. "Sheriff, the telegraph line's down, cut near the Cana Brava road, last night." "Was it Lampião?" Tobias asked, wiping sweat from his neck. "If it wasn't him, it was someone who wants him to show up without warning." The mood shifted. Doors started closing earlier. Children stopped playing in the streets. Even the church bell rang softer, as if the priest himself knew what was coming. Meanwhile, Lampião was charting the path. He was camped 4 leagues away, in a hollowed-out stone cave barely big enough for the whole gang. There, hidden in the rocks, he planned a way in and a way out, without losing a single soul. Now, it wasn't just rage fueling the king of the Cangacho, it was strategy. He sent in 3 trusted informants to infiltrate the town. The first was Miru, posing as a candy merchant. He opened a small sweets stall near the market, selling sugar, smiles, and rapadura. He gave credit, made friends, listened more than he spoke. Within a week, he knew every guard's name, the exact time of shift changes, and most importantly, who had a weak mind. The second was Batata, a wiry little man, sharp as a blade. He pretended to be a helper. Lida offered her services to take care of the mules that brought supplies to the garrison. She observed the side gate of the jail, memorizing the patrol patterns and the slip-ups of the night watchman. She had the eyes of an owl and the ears of a cat. The third was Tisil, the boldest of them all. He arrived as a new priest sent by the Diocese of Pinedo. He spoke softly, made gentle gestures, always with a worn Bible in his hands and a wooden rosary hanging from his neck. Slowly, he began visiting the jail, claiming to hear confessions. He touched the soldiers' shoulders, whispering words of faith, but inside he was fire hidden beneath church cloth. It was Tisil who discovered the most important name of the mission, Elias. Elias was the jail guard, a pot-bellied man who limped from a bad leg and smelled strongly of liquor. He owed money to the town's loan sharks. His wife was always sick, and his child hadn't eaten meat in weeks. No one respected him, not even the soldiers. He was the weak link in the chain. Batata struck up a conversation with him in an alley behind the store. He offered him some cachaça and spoke of money. "You're a lucky man," Batata said. "There's someone who wants to free you from your debts and get you far from this cursed life. But you'll have to do just one thing. Sleep on a chosen night," he added. Elias looked up wide-eyed and asked, "What happens if they catch me?" "If the soldiers find out, you'll die," Batata replied. "But if Lampião finds out you betrayed him, you'll die slower." Elias fell silent. Then he looked down and spat. "What if I agree?" he asked. "You'll live, and you'll be rich. Inside the cell, you'll have a life worth living." Araya could no longer stand, but the priest visited him twice a week, always bringing a piece of bread, a razor blade, a hook, and a note with instructions. Araya knew the hell was coming, and it would come with round glasses and a leather hat. Back at the garrison, the sergeants were overconfident. They thought Lampião would never have the courage to attack a walled town, but they didn't know that Lampião wouldn't come as a cangachero. he would come as a shadow. Behind the stall of Miru, the scent was of sweat, cachaça, and secrets. The night was wet, light rain falling sideways, tapping on the leather rooftops. Batata leaned against the adobe wall when Elias appeared. His eyes were deep set, his beard unkempt, his shirt soaked, clinging to his body. "Here," Elias asked. Batata opened his bag and pulled out a small bundle. Inside were 3 gold coins, which shone even in the dark. "This is just the scent," Batata said. "The real reward comes later, when Araya is free and breathing in the wild. And if things go bad, you run far away and never speak my name again." Elias took a deep breath, thinking of his wife, writhing in pain at home, and his child with an empty plate. He also thought of Lampião, who killed with a knife anyone who betrayed him. His hand trembled when he grabbed the coins. "What's the plan?" "Simple," Batata replied. "In 2 nights you'll sleep outside the prison. Leave the door slightly ajar. Araya will go out alone. We'll take care of the rest." "I'm making a pact with the devil," Elias said, worried. "You're making a pact with the only chance you have. Lampião doesn't forget who helps, but he doesn't forgive those who get in the way." Elias nodded, turned his back, and disappeared. Into the rain, vanishing into the woods. Lampião listened to each report. Tisil came back with details: the position of the cell, the soldiers' routine, the locks, and the oversights. Miru took notes, and Batata mapped the escape routes. It was a plan carried out with the precision of a watchmaker. Unlike the explosive attacks, Lampião knew that there any mistake would mean death. Araya's cell was on the eastern side. 1 door, 1 window with thick bars. The sheriff slept in the barracks next door. 2 guards stood at the entrance, and a sentry passed every 15 minutes. "How long after he leaves?" asked Lampião. "About 5 minutes until someone notices. Then we need to be waiting outside." Lampião decided, "I'll take only 6 men. The quietest ones. The rest will stay on a farm 2 kilometers away. The attack will be on the 2nd night at 2:30, when the sleepiest sentry is on duty. Tisil would give the final signal. On the next visit, he would leave a small knife and a piece of paper with 1 word written in rooster's blood inside the bread." In the early morning, inside the cell, Araya read the note with tired eyes. He folded the paper and hid it in the lining of his torn hammock. He waited without emotion, just silence. The town was asleep, but the calmness was only the cover of the storm. The sheriff, without word from the government, doubled the guard. But it was too late. The town was surrounded, not by weapons, but by eyes. And when the king of Cangasho surrounds with his eyes, no one sees him coming. The day before, Elias went to Miru's shop and left the message in a faint voice. "It will be tomorrow. I'll leave my post before midnight. The cell will be open. Do what you have to do. Will you disappear afterward?" asked Miru without looking. "I'll run south where no one will ever hear of Lampião again." Elias left. Behind him, only footprints and one last look of fear. In the woods, Lampião sharpened his dagger. Each stroke on the blade was a silent prayer. Around the fire, the 6 chosen men checked their weapons, adjusted their cartridge belts, and straightened their hammocks. No one spoke. All that could be heard was the rustle of the fine rain. Lampião raised his gaze. "Tomorrow is a rescue, not a war. If they kill, it's because we made a mistake. If they die, it's because they didn't listen to me." Everyone felt the weight of his words. He stood up, adjusted his hat, and held the medal close to his chest. "Santo Antonio, guide me, because tomorrow death will sleep earlier." The rain fell lightly, the kind that doesn't soak or wash, just dampens the leather. The bones grew cold. In Riachão, everything slept. The lights in the square were off, the street lamps trembling in the wind. No one knew, but in that very dawn, silence would have a visitor, and that visitor would become a legend. The church clock struck 2:20 a.m. when Tisil, the false priest, appeared at the corner. drenched in his cassock, a rosary around his neck, a Bible in his hand, and a bottle of holy water hanging from his arm. The soldier at the door was half awake, half hungry. He only made a gesture with his head. "I've come to pray with the condemned," Tissel murmured. "Go on," the guard replied, not lifting his head. "The shift change is coming." Tissel entered quietly, his steps slow, his breath held tight. Hidden in the seams of his cassock, a thin knife, sharp as a needle. His heart raced faster than the bells of the church on a procession day. He reached the cell, and inside, Raya was already standing, eyes alert in the dark. "Is it tonight?" Tissel asked. Raya nodded with a discreet gesture. "The cell will unlock itself," Tissel added. Elias took care of it. Tissel pulled the blade out from inside the Bible and slid it between the bars, followed by a piece of bread. "Wait for the rain to pick up. Listen for 3 whistles. On the 3rd you run," Tissel whispered. Raya took the knife, his hands bruised. "If I make it out alive, you'll earn my respect. If I fall, tell Lampião it was worth it." The false priest made the sign of the cross and disappeared down the corridor, a shadow that had never been there. Outside, Lampião and his 6 men hid among the old cemetery tombstones, peering through the side of the jail. The rain trickled off their leather hats, dripping down to the daggers at their belts. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the thick breathing of the sky. Lampião looked up and murmured, "Saint Anthony, if you're my godfather, don't leave me now." A whistle, then another. The rain thickened. The 3rd one came. Inside, Raya understood. He turned the doorknob. It was loose. He stepped barefoot, knife in hand, his steps light, his heart almost tearing out of his chest. He reached the back. A door. It was open. Elias had done his part. But just before crossing, he heard a sharp click, the cold sound of a revolver being cocked. He turned slowly. Elias was in the shadows, gun in hand, hands trembling. I can't," Elias stammered. "If they find out, I'm dead. If you run, they'll kill me," Raya replied softly, the knife tilting to his side. "I can't do it. I can't." Outside, Lampião saw the silhouette standing in the doorway. He knew something had gone wrong. Without hesitation, he ran along the cemetery wall, entering through the side like a bolt of lightning. Inside the jail, time stood still. Elias was pointing the gun. Raya held the knife, and then he appeared. Lampião, a tall figure under the starry sky, his gaze firm, the weight of 1,000 deaths on his shoulders. His presence filled the corridor more than the smell of gunpowder. "Put that gun down, boy," he said calmly, "or you'll die facing what you fear most." Elias dropped the revolver without a word. It wasn't courage, it was sheer terror. He fell to his knees, sweating cold. Raya took the dagger Lampião had brought, let out a short, hoarse breath, and said, "I thought you wouldn't come. I promise little, but what I promise I keep." 2 soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. They saw only shadows in the dim light, but as they recognized Lampião, they froze. The sertão held its breath for a second. No one understood what had just happened. The jail door wide open, 2 armed soldiers, and Lampião stepping out slowly, leaving a trail of silence behind him. Not even the wind moved. He passed between the 2 like a shadow. The first soldier lowered his gaze, the second just swallowed hard. Raya, though wounded, followed behind, supported by Cascavel, who trembled from his legs to his soul. Lampião spoke without looking back. "No one dies today, but tomorrow depends on what you spread." When they disappeared into the back alley, one of them still had the courage to ask, "Captain, why did you leave us alive?" Lampião stopped, turned his head slowly and said, "Because you're not my enemy, but if you ever become one, you'll know." Then he vanished into the darkness. Outside, the sky was collapsing. It was as if the sertão itself had woken up to wash. Away the scene of that miracle, The escape wasn't swift. It couldn't be. Raya limped. Cascavel carried 2 rifles and the weight of fear on his shoulders. Lampião led the way, knife in hand, eyes wide open like lanterns at a wake. Along the way, they passed startled chickens, backyards half-locked, children awake in their mothers' arms praying. The town no longer slept. It felt that something out of this world was happening. At the top of Church Street, an old blind man clapped his hands and said, "Lampião's coming back." I felt the thunder in my chest. It's not rain, it's a warning. The church bells began to toll without anyone pulling the rope. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was fear ringing from within. They crossed the entire town in silence, cut behind the old reservoir, and took the path to the high forest. Raya stumbled, barely able to get up. "Go ahead, Captain. Leave me here. It's already worth it." Lampião knelt. "You're my man, and my man dies standing or doesn't die." He lifted Raya onto his shoulder as if carrying a cross. Cascavel wiped his knife. What a night! What a night, my God! When they reached a clearing, they stopped. No horses in sight. The meeting point had been compromised. It rained too much. The mud was knee-deep. "We go on foot," Lampião said. "If someone falls, we lift them up. If the volante comes, we turn." Hours later, the day began to brighten, but it was still night in the heart of those chasing him. Delegate Tobias spat blood in rage. He entered my town, my jail, and took my prisoner. He ordered searches from house to house, offering a reward for any clue, but no one spoke, neither for gold nor for fear. The people were silent, as if in gratitude to those who dare to challenge the world. On the old road through the Backlands, the 3 cangacheros were walking, dirty, soaked, and still alive. They passed by an abandoned shack. Lampião ordered them to stop. Inside, they lit a faint lantern. Raya sat on the floor and took from his pocket a piece of rolled cloth and a scapulary and kissed it gently. "I prayed, Captain. Even doubting. I prayed. I didn't think you would come." Lampião lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply. "Some things we don't choose. We just feel." They remained silent, only the sound of rain beating on the rotten roof. Cascavel took off his boots. He had one. Foot in a live trap, but smiled. "If this isn't a miracle, I don't know what is." Lampião smiled slightly. "A miracle is coming back and finding your people. The rest is just Backlands." Finally, when they reached their destination, almost noon, they found potatoes, horses, water, and cachaça. The sun was already burning. Again, Lampião mounted his horse, but before leaving he stopped and looked at his 2 men. "None of us are heroes. We only know the weight of our promises. And I promised never to let my men rot in jail." Raya didn't speak, but his eyes said more than words. As they rode toward nothingness, stories began to spread. They said Lampião had vanished into the rain, turned into wind, that the soldiers slept and woke up with an empty cell, that he had entered through a rat hole and rode out like lightning. Each mouth told a different version, but they all ended the same way. It was something from another world. Days later, in Riachão, a boy climbed a tree and shouted, "Minha, the man from the story passed through here. I swear, he had a hat, just like Lampião's." The mother ordered him to be quiet, but deep down she also believed. Lampião's name echoed once again in the markets, on the roads, in the yards, but now with more faith than fear. And when people asked, "Is it true? Did he invade the jail?" the answer was always the same. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But after that night, even the forest grew quieter. 2 months after the invasion, the village no longer whispered Lampião's name. The jail was hastily rebuilt, but it never had an important prisoner again. The town seemed cursed, as if Lampião's trail had left a silent warning. Raya was said to have been seen for the last time. Taking a train towards Piauí, he bought a one-way ticket. holding a red handkerchief in his hand and an old book on his lap. Perhaps he left the cangacho behind. Perhaps he died in the woods, but no one dares to ask. Cascavel, however, turned into a legend. The legend goes that a herb seller walked through the fairs of Huazero with a crooked gaze and a knife tied to his waist. He claimed to be a healer, but when someone spoke of Lampião, he spat on the ground and vanished into the crowd. Some swear it was him. Others say he turned into a beast, a black dog that only appears on stormy days. Delegate Tobias lost everything. He was demoted and sent to a forgotten district without electricity, roads, or a future, guilty of letting Lampião escape. He spent his nights staring into the wilderness with a glass of cachaça and an unloaded rifle by his side, waiting, perhaps for a shot, perhaps for forgiveness. In the Sertão, justice has never been like the justice in books. Here, punishment is not read in Latin. It's sung in the cries of a mother who lost her son, in the silence of a father who buries his own name in the dry earth. Lampião did not seek vengeance. He sought balance, a crooked way of doing what's right. Perhaps he regretted it, perhaps not. But when he entered that prison with his face covered and his heart aflame, it wasn't just to save a man. It was to remind everyone that a cangachero also feels, loves, and suffers. And when he left, leaving the soldiers with wounded pride and silent mouths, he also left a lesson that isn't written on paper. Not everyone who carries a weapon is a villain, and not everyone who wears a uniform is a hero. Years later, a boy, one of those who sell sweets at the market, said he saw everything. He said that on that night when the prison was taken, he saw a shadow stop in front of the church and make the sign of the cross. It was Lampião, said the boy, but not as in the pictures, without a hat, without gold, without fury. There was a weight in his eyes that even time couldn't erase. The old, blind priest of the village swore that on that same day he received a strange confession. A nameless man entered, kneeled, and cried for 5 minutes without saying a word. Then he left a coin on the altar and disappeared. No one knows if it was true, but every time the full moon touches the roof of the old prison, someone lights a candle on the doorframe. No name, no reason. Just to remember that, on that day, justice walked in the dark, but didn't stumble. They say that in the Sertão, everything that is said once lives forever. That's why the name of Lampião didn't just remain in the dust of the roads or in the pages of old books. It stayed in the hearts of those who live with fear and courage at the same time. Days passed, then weeks, then months, and over time, the traces of the last night in Riachão vanished. Footprints were covered by mud and later by the weeds that grew back, but the stories kept sprouting like mandacaru in dry season. A boy heard from his grandfather that Lampião crossed the sky riding a horse made of smoke. A woman swore she heard Araya's cries coming from the forest, begging forgiveness for killing a soldier. And an old blind man sitting in the piranhas. Market always said, that night the Sertão breathed differently. No one knew where Lampião had gone. Some said he went to Bahia, others that he crossed into Ceará, head covered and heart at war. But the truth is, no one ever knows where a man goes when he carries a whole world inside his chest. In the silence of the woods, the footprints vanished. But in Araya's heart, the sound of that night never faded. Sometimes he'd wake up drenched in sweat. Other times with the smell of the cell lingering in his memory, but always with Lampião's face carved into his mind, the man who walked into a uniformed hell just to fulfill a promise. Elias, the jailer who survived, quit the force months later. They say he moved to a village deep in the countryside where no one knew his name. He started going to church every Sunday, but never again could he hear a gunshot without trembling. Cascavel, the young cangachero, became a legend among the outlaws. He wore the scar on his shoulder like a medal, and to every group of sertanejos he met on the road he'd say, "That night I saw hell." and rode out with Lampião himself. As for Delegate Tobias, he never recovered. The shame of his lost honor was worse than any bullet. He doubled the guards, reinforced the jail. But no one obeyed like before. A whisper was enough to freeze the men. And what if Lampião comes back? Years passed, but no one forgot. The town slowly grew. New houses, children born, Sunday markets. But when it rained the same way it did that night, the elders still shut their windows tight, and someone always whispered, "Tonight is Lampião's night." As if the sertão, by instinct, just knew. Some ghosts don't die. They only rest, and when the fire dies low and the night turns still, some swear they hear the trot of a distant horse, with a silent man atop it, hat pulled low, eyes on the ground, carrying a burden the world will never understand. A burden called loyalty, a name called Lampião. If you felt that chill in your soul, it's because the story still lives inside you. So leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who also believes that the sertão still has its heroes. We'll meet again in the next story.